You can't dig up a man's road without his permission. Yeah, that's how it started. And if you've ever felt your heart drop into your boots, you know the feeling I had that Monday morning. There I was, mouth full of dust and anger, watching a bulldozer rip apart the driveway I'd laid with my old man 15 years ago. All I could do was yell, but my words got swallowed up by the engine's roar. Just another complaint carried off on the wind. Across the chaos, there she stood, Karen Dempsey, the HOA's self-appointed queen, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand, smirk plastered on her face like she'd just won a war nobody else knew was happening. She waved to the driver, hollering about community improvements, and I could hear her voice in my head, that syrupy tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable, even while plotting a coup. I knew this wasn't about fixing anything. It was about sending a message, hers. I'd seen her whispering at meetings, pointing at my place at the diner like it was a rash nobody wanted to touch. But what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd set my own little trap. Every scrape of that bulldozer was getting recorded. My gate camera blinked. The tiny recorder in my pocket caught every word, and I just stood there, daring her to keep going. She strutted over, chin up, talking about how I'd neglected the road for years. "We're finally fixing it, Mark," she said, fake smile never slipping. I stared at that trench like it was a grave, smiled right back, and told her, "That's funny. Last I checked, this isn't your road to fix." She tossed her hair, tried to sound official. "Shared zone, my cousin at Public Works, we've got permits." And that's when I pulled out my phone, showed her the county property map with my land outlined in blue. "Permits for my private easement?" I asked, real quiet. She blinked, the mask slipping for just a second, and that was all I needed. Neighbors started gathering, drawn by the ruckus. Mrs. Patterson whispering to her husband, kids circling on their bikes with phones out. Everyone suddenly remembering the Benson property had never been under HOA rule. Karen kept barking orders, but the workers were getting nervous. That's when my cousin Ethan rolled up in his old Ford, calm as a stone. Except Ethan's a property lawyer, the kind you want in your corner when things get weird. He barely said a word before calling the county on speaker, and when the answer came back, my land, my easement, not HOA territory, you could feel the mood shift. Karen tried to laugh it off, but the crowd wasn't buying it anymore. Ethan warned her that any more digging would count as destruction of private property, and just like that, the workers started packing up. Karen glared at me, jaw tight. "You're making a mistake, Mark. This isn't over." And I just smiled, because what she didn't know was that I'd already been through her HOA records the night before, found fake maintenance reports, her signature on all the wrong lines. The sun set on a torn-up road and a leader out of moves, but the real trap was only just springing shut. By Tuesday, Karen was spinning the story online. Clerical error, not trespass, and the comments exploded. Some folks sided with her. Others started asking who really owned the road. Ethan told me to play it cool. The more she talked, the deeper the hole got. That afternoon, I walked into her weekly HOA meeting. She tried to sound unbothered, but the room was tense, her friends quiet. One guy faking notes, and in turn sweating bullets. I slid a folded paper across the table. "The county doesn't recognize these permits," I said. Her hands shook, color draining from her face as she realized the maintenance number was for a sewer repair in another town. "That's document fraud, Karen," I said, keeping my voice low. She called it a typo. I told her the county inspector would be by to chat. Outside, neighbors were already gossiping. From across the cul-de-sac, grinning and asking if I was really going to let this go. "No, I said. "I'm going to make sure she never does this to anyone again." Ethan and I drew up an injunction that night, not to hurt her, just to stop her from digging herself in deeper. But by Wednesday, she was out there, taping flyers to every mailbox about vital access and community safety. I sent a photo to Ethan, who replied, "More evidence of harassment." The county clerk flagged her HOA account for review, and by evening, Karen showed up at my gate, trying to play nice, wanted to fix the road together. I handed her the injunction notice instead. Her face froze, and she stormed off, paper in hand, muttering threats. By sunrise, county trucks were out front. A reflective vest told her this wasn't her jurisdiction. Karen's shock was real. She wasn't in control anymore. Word got out, and the neighborhood turned into a circus. She filed a counter-complaint. Her cousin admitted to fake permits. The legal walls closed in, but Karen kept pushing, showed up with new contractors, spray-painted the road. Even had her son out at midnight trying to dig up evidence. I recorded everything, every threat, every late-night stunt. Finally, at an emergency HOA meeting, Karen tried to paint herself the victim, twisting the truth with a PowerPoint, until my security footage popped up on the screen, her voice on tape, ordering the bulldozer onto my land. The room erupted, and someone called for a vote. In minutes, she was suspended, all projects frozen, the gavel hitting like thunder. Her car vanished from the driveway. The air was still, but it felt electric, like the whole street was waiting for something else to drop. But people like Karen don't disappear, they escalate. The next night, she and her son snuck out to pry up the "Welcome to Cedar Pines" sign, but the camera caught them cold. When county officials showed up to document it, she ripped up their notice, shouting about harassment. By the end of the week, her HOA privileges were gone, county audits exposed thousands in missing funds, and even the local paper ran a story about HOA overreach. Still, Karen lurked. Anonymous messages. Fake accounts. A letter in my mailbox. This isn't over. Her ghost lingered. Always a step away. When the public hearing finally came, every lie, every fraud, every abuse of power got laid bare. The HOA was dissolved, her reputation shattered, her family moving out. Daniel, her husband, came by, hollow and tired, telling me she'd been obsessed, not with me, but with control. No one won. I told him quietly, looking out at the road, at the neighborhood slowly returning to life. Karen's last act was always in the shadows, a flyer here, a photo there, a note or a message. But every time she crossed a line, the law closed in tighter. Then one morning, a deputy delivered the news. Karen was gone, overdose, alone, control slipping away for good. The neighborhood exhaled for the first time in years. Some felt pity, some felt relief, but everyone moved on. I planted a tree by the road that spring, roots deep, branches reaching, a promise that something lasting could come from all that chaos. Sometimes I'd find little reminders, an old sign, a locket, a note, but they didn't bother me anymore. The road was mine, peaceful at last, and as I watched the sun rise over new gravel, I finally understood it was never about beating Karen. It was about drawing a line no one would ever cross again. So, let me ask you, was I right to fight back, or did I just become another player in a war nobody really wins? Drop your thoughts below, especially if you've ever tangled with an HOA or stood your ground when no one else would. Because if there's one thing I learned, it's this. Justice takes time, but peace is worth the fight. Funny thing about winning a fight like that, or maybe just surviving it, is you expect the air to clear right away, like all that anger and noise will just wash out with the next rainstorm. Truth is, it lingers. Even after the gavel drops, after the neighbors start waving again, after the roads patched up and the trucks are gone, there's this leftover charge in the air, like the ground still waiting for another tremor. I guess I was waiting too, half of me wanting to believe it was over, the other half convinced some ghost would show up with a new shovel or a lawyer's letter, just to remind me it's never really finished. Those weeks after the HOA dissolved, the neighborhood felt lighter, no doubt. Kids started riding bikes without looking over their shoulders. Folks mowed their lawns without worrying about the color of their mailbox, and for the first time in ages, my own coffee tasted like something other than nerves. Even the dogs seemed happier, less barking at passing cars, more tail wagging. But the thing about peace, especially the kind you fight for, is it never feels permanent at first. Every noise at night, every flicker of emotion light. I'd catch myself holding my breath, half expecting to see Karen's car parked somewhere in the shadows, or another anonymous envelope shoved under my door. Then one cold January morning, just as the sun was turning the frost to steam on the fresh gravel, a sheriff's deputy knocked on my door. He handed me an envelope, didn't say much, just that it was official. I held it for a second, heart pounding, thinking maybe it was some last-ditch lawsuit, but when I opened it, all I found was silence. Karen was gone. Overdose, the paper said. No funeral, no family gathering. Just a line from the hospital and the deputy's awkward sympathy. I stood there, envelope trembling in my hand, and felt nothing at first. Not victory, not relief, just a deep, strange emptiness. Like the argument had been pulled out from under me, leaving nothing but dust and old scars. News spread through the neighborhood in whispers, the way it always does, folks meeting by their fences. Voices low, some pity in their eyes, some disbelief. Daniel, her husband, stopped by, looking older, the lines on his face deeper. "She kept a file on you," he said, setting down a thin manila folder. On my table. It wasn't hate. It was obsession. She just couldn't let go. I flipped through the photos, the notes, the emails, my own face staring back at me from her surveillance. The last page said, "He thinks he won." I closed the folder and slid it back. "Nobody won," I told him. He nodded, shoulders slumping, and left with the quiet of a man who's finally outlived a storm. Spring came fast that year. The county workers paved the road for good, official this time, uncontested, and for the first time, the sign out front read "Private Easement, Benson Family." The whole street threw what they called a road reopening party. Donuts, coffee, even remade a speech about standing up to bullies. I just smiled, grateful, but all I wanted was the silence. I took a slow walk that night, down the newly paved road, past the old spot where Karen's sign used to stand. The wind was cool, the air smelled like earth and rain, and for the first time in a long time, the only thing waiting at the end was peace. But closure's a funny thing. I found a locket buried by the ditch, a photo inside of Karen and her son, both smiling like the world was still kind. Before either of us knew how bad things could get, I left it on the new post, whispered, "Rest now. Enough's enough." That's the part nobody tells you about these fights. It's not just about winning or losing. It's about knowing when to let go. As the weeks rolled on, life settled back into a gentle rhythm. The neighbors painted fences, planted flowers. The mail came without threats tucked inside, and I started to trust the quiet again. Even Ethan, my cousin, moved on to new cases, though he'd still call now and then, just to make sure I was sleeping better. And I was. Mostly. Though sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the cameras before bed, just a habit that might never really die out. Then, one day, a letter showed up from the county commissioner, asking me to accept some silly plaque for civic responsibility. I almost laughed. Me, just a guy who got tired of being pushed around. But I went to the ceremony anyway. The room was full of neighbors, reporters, even a few of the city workers who'd once been duped by Karen's fake permits. The commissioner shook my hand, said something about how standing your ground is sometimes the most selfless act of all. I nodded, polite, but honestly, all I could think about was getting back home, back to my porch and my coffee. Sometimes, late at night, I'd see a car parked at the edge of the street, headlights off, engine running. Maybe it was nothing, maybe just someone lost, but I'd always save the footage, just in case. Daniel reached out once more, told me Karen had tried to start over in another town, even wanted to run another association. He said she blamed everyone but herself for how it ended, that she couldn't accept losing control. You can't rebuild on denial. I told him, and he agreed, though his voice was full of fear, not anger. I planted a few trees along the road that spring, wanting to put down something that would last, roots deep enough to outlive the memory of all this chaos. The road was quiet now. Kids played where the trenches used to be. People waved without looking nervous. It almost felt like home again. But just when I started to believe it, a late-night noise snapped me back. A car parked by the ditch, a figure standing in the dark. I watched from the porch, didn't move, just let the cameras do their work. By morning, they were gone, nothing left but tire tracks and an old fear I thought I'd buried. Ethan told me not to let it get to me. Every time she crosses a line, it works in your favor. He was right. But some ghosts don't care about evidence. They just want to haunt. When the county called for a public hearing to finalize the HOA's dissolution, I went, not for revenge, but because I needed to see it end. The room was tense. Neighbors, reporters, city folks, Karen sitting up front, hair pulled back, eyes hollow. They read out the audit, the forged permits, the misuse of funds, and for once, Karen didn't argue. She just stared at the floor, all her pride drained away. Daniel stood by the door, didn't say a word, and when it was over, just nodded quietly at me. As I walked out into the rain, I realized the victory I'd fought for didn't taste sweet. It tasted like relief, quiet, cold, and real. The neighborhood healed, slowly. People stopped by, thanked me for standing up, offered to help patch the road. I accepted, not because I needed the help, but because it felt like a new start. One last time, as the spring sun poured over the new gravel, I walked to the end of the road, ran my hand along the smooth wooden post that marked the Benson easement, and let out a breath I'd been holding for a year. No more shouting, no more court dates, no more watching over my shoulder. But I kept the cameras on, just in case. Because peace, like trust, is something you have to protect, one quiet morning at a time. Now, let me throw this back to you. Have you ever stood up when everyone told you to just let it go? Was it worth it in the end? Or do you think some fights just change you, even after you win? Drop your story or your opinion in the comments. After all, nobody ever really wins alone. Sometimes, you just survive long enough for the truth to matter.